and it's about creating the mental environment that allows us to be controlled.
Absolutely. And,
Yeah.
the good news is that, again, as I see it, as I experience it, in the age of awakening today, we are questioning more. And this is the good part, is that we are awakening, one by one, very small communities, etc., to question more, to see more of the bigger picture rather than just take things at face value. And this is very, very important, I think, for the evolution of our society as a whole. And of course, this whole idea goes against two key activities, and that is obedience of human beings and the indoctrination of human beings. We see both of these themes very prevalent from the beginning of time, really, throughout religious systems and religious institutions in various degrees. But we see it today very profoundly in the education system. And this is something you speak a lot about, the obedience and indoctrination. How do you see that playing out from your experience on both teachers and students?
Yeah. Well, I see awareness as being a neutral thing as opposed to a positive thing unless it's connected with how you're acting in the world. If you're just being aware and you're being sensitive and you're taking information and you're developing opinions, I see that as a neutral thing. I see that as not actually helping very much. I think that that awareness has to be connected with action, and I think that action leads to more awareness and deeper awareness, because to every action there is a reaction,
Right.
and that will inform you in a deep way that you couldn't get that information from the usual sources of so-called awareness. So I believe in that connection. And there's a very famous pedagogue, a teacher by the name of Paulo Freire, who explained this using a word which is praxis. He explained that human development, personal development, was something that occurred through praxis, which means that you reflect, you take in, but you also act.
Mm.
And that action leads to more action and more reflection, and it's that symbiotic combination between acting to liberate yourself, because we're all oppressed by the systems in which we live in. We can try to escape them and live in a bubble, but that can only work for so long, and it leads to an artificial life. The other way is to try to fight back in order to fight your own oppression and to liberate yourself and allow your full development as a human being. And this is the pedagogy of Paulo Freire, which I am very impressed by, and which I have tried to apply in my work and in my life. Um, so I find the word awareness is one that has to be linked with the word praxis. That's my sense of my understanding of awareness, you know. And Paulo Freire also said another thing that I think is crucial in terms of understanding how education works. He said this. He said, if a young person who's been harmed by the system, and we've all been harmed by the system because we live in these harsh hierarchies that control our lives, but if this young person, which is any one of us, does not discover true, authentic rebellion against the system inside themselves, if you don't discover that as part of your development, then you will be stunted and you will find self-destruction and you will find substitutes for development. And this can involve drugs, it can involve destructive activities such as violence, crime, it can involve escapism, it can involve all kinds of things. But basically, he was convinced that such a person had to find what he called authentic rebellion. And I think that that authentic rebellion then connects with his idea of praxis, which is nothing if it's not also connected to awareness and reflection and learning and so on, you see. I believe that praxis is a key to transforming the world to make it more sane and more human.
Yeah. And I can so agree with the value in that, because it's often, I call it the motivational poster syndrome, where it's not enough to just read something beautiful or something inspirational, but it's that action, as you were just talking about. What are we going to do about it, right? That's where really the power lies within. How do you see this landscape overall? I mean, from my perspective, it's in major need of evolution and change and transformation to, be of better use, to be better suited to the modern way of not just life, but to the human mind, which is constantly evolving. How do you view the limits of the current education system?
Well, the educational system as it stands in, let's say, Canada or North America
Mm-hmm.
is highly developed and highly tuned and very responsive to achieving what the establishment wants.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is working. It is working exactly as designed and as managed. But unfortunately, it is harming the students that go through that system at the personal level. So it creates a deep harm on individuals, I believe. I mean, there are individuals who are able to adapt to this, and
Mm-hmm.
they tend to be the ones that adapt well are the more privileged members of society that will also be given the better jobs, the ones where they have more creative freedom in their work, and so on, where they have more control over their immediate day-to-day environment because of these high-level jobs. You see, those individuals will be able to adapt relatively well, but even those individuals will develop I would say, a spiritual malaise through their work because it is not a meaningful life to be serving the system when the system is this, you know, corrupt and cruel and murderous and so on. In the end, that reality has to be somewhat present in our consciousness, you know. So there is a malaise that develops with even high-level professional workers because they come to understand that their work is not that meaningful
Mm-hmm.
and that they don't have really the freedom to do what they would as persons like to do.
Yeah.
So how do you solve that? Well, in my book, I try to explain that it's a constant battle. It's a constant battle between what the hierarchical control system wants, and to achieve that, it has to a large extent, destroy the individual, atomize and destroy the individual impulses and the individual heart and mind. There's going to be a battle between that tendency towards a stronger hierarchy and more control, and the tendency of the individual to seek control over their own lives and over their immediate community and to have a meaningful life. That is necessarily, in my understanding of how this works, that's necessarily a battle that will always be present.
Mm.
Even if you move towards a more ideal system where there's less hierarchical domination and more democratic decision making, even in a case like that, the society will spontaneously tend to avoid towards creating more hierarchy. I believe that we can conclude that from an examination of history. It's absolutely true that there is a tendency towards moving in that direction, what ultimately can be called corporate fascism. And so the only antidote to that, I believe, is for individuals to fight back, and to fight back in a way where they try to preserve and save and develop themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Only individuals coalescing to fight back eventually will turn the clock back a little bit and bring back a little bit more democracy, and then we start again, you know?
So it's about, I guess, gaining some of that independence, some of that autonomy, rather than, again, being part of that obedience and indoctrination, is what you're saying.
Yes, and it's easy to do. Well, no, there is one difficult thing you have to do at the beginning, which is the most difficult part. And then once you can achieve that, it sort of comes automatically. The most difficult thing, which Paulo Freire explained, is acquiring a consciousness, a deep personal consciousness of how you're truly being oppressed.
Yeah.
In other words, the nature of the oppression against you, your own oppression. That is the most difficult thing to perceive. Even those of us who feel that we're very aware and very thoughtful and so on, we don't, we hide from ourselves our true oppression. If you can achieve a consciousness of your own oppression, start to achieve it, then you can start to fight that oppression, and then that leads to more consciousness of its exact nature. You see, and Paulo Freire developed a method where he worked in groups of no more than 8 or 10 individuals, where they tried to enhance that development of recognizing their oppression and starting to fight it. And so his book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, is all about this method and how you do that. Various methods, skills he developed to do that. You see, I mean, one doesn't have to read Paulo Freire, and one doesn't have to know even about Paulo Freire. But that's the concept. I think that's what's needed. I believe that, if you're thinking in terms of helping a friend, or in terms of therapy, or in terms of anything like that, anytime people try to help each other, I think it's about really becoming aware of where the oppression is, and then becoming aware of, therefore, what is the immediate thing that you can do. And it doesn't mean signing a petition, and it doesn't mean writing a letter, and it doesn't mean any of these things that we do because we're good people and we want to do these things, and that's fine. But fighting your own oppression means actually pushing back at the hand that is trying to grab you by the throat, and it's the immediate thing. It's where the system has a grip on you, a contact on you, that needs to be identified and then fought back. Now, there are many of us are rather privileged, and we choose to escape instead,
Mm-hmm.
And we try to pretend like there isn't this oppression.
Yeah.
But I think that's the challenge. I believe that.
Well, I think so too, and many other experts from various fields have come out and said the very same thing, that in a way, sure, there's, you have to go to work more or less, you have to pay your mortgage, you have to pay your taxes, but for the most part, on planet Earth, especially in North America, Europe, etc., most of us have what can be termed a good life, or good enough that we can bypass or look past all these other things that sort of don't feel right, maybe give us some challenges, headaches sometimes. But it's until we are, sort of pushed maybe in some way, as many people in developing or developed nations, where something, that passion maybe comes out, or that courage to face that oppression.
There is a phenomenon in our society that illustrates this point, that we just go along until something happens that makes us notice that
Yeah.
we're oppressed. And the phenomenon that I'm thinking of is whistleblowers.
Yeah.
Many whistleblowers become whistleblowers by accident. They actually are just trying to do the right thing. They're driven by their own moral values, and they have accepted the moral position that you're supposed to do the right thing, and you have to be truthful, and you have to do good to others, and so on. And so in their workplace, whether it's a professional workplace or other, they will see something that is unjust, and they'll try to correct it, or they'll try to point it out. And lo and behold, the bosses are angry with them, and they're being scolded or put aside and told to shut up, and so on. And they're wondering, what is happening to me? All of a sudden, I was an employee that was appreciated. Now I'm seen as a black sheep. And it's really a dramatic thing that happens to them, because they didn't understand the underlying ideology of the system. Instead, they went with their hearts.
Yeah.
And that creates a kind of dissonance. And so whistleblowers literally go through hell often. There are some incredibly conscious and aware whistleblowers who do it by choice. And I'm thinking of Snowden, who is, I think, an incredible hero. And I'm thinking of Bradley Manning also. These people are just heroes. I mean, there was a high level of consciousness in what they did, and they chose to, at very high risk, to expose things that needed to be exposed.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's so true. And again, where most people see, I'm sure, lots of injustices, whether it's within the educational institutions, whether it's within other corporations or institutions. And it's kind of that idea of, well, I don't want to be the one to rock the boat, right? Perhaps I could just pretend I don't know it, I don't see it. So definitely we have today, what I'd like to see as more people coming out and saying, no, I need to think with my heart and feel with my heart and not just, kind of follow along pretending that I didn't know or didn't see.